It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week.
Bill Maher is at it again, and this time, Democratic Socialists are catching the heat. In a segment that was as ruthless as it was funny, the outspoken comedian laid out why blindly embracing socialist policies is a recipe for disaster, and why whether people like it or not, capitalism still outperforms their ideology. His main target, Zoran Mamdani. And Maher didn't hold back for a moment. Buckle up, things get spicy.
Democrats must recognize that Zoran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? And if you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years. Now, Mamdani seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
New Yorkers completely brushed off Abigail's Spanberger warning and went ahead and elected a socialist anyway. Honestly, it's classic Democratic behavior, plenty of speeches, press conferences, and talk of strategy, but when it comes to actually hearing what voters care about, the message never seems to land. It's the same pattern every election cycle. The party drifts further left, insists everything is perfectly fine, and then acts stunned when the results blow up in their faces. What makes it even more puzzling is that more than half of Americans have been crystal clear they don't want socialism. They don't want the policies, the economic uncertainty, or the chaos that tends to follow. Yet the DNC keeps moving closer to the very ideology voters are rejecting. It's almost like the party can't resist walking straight into its own self-inflicted problems.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist!
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Maher, like many seasoned political commentators and analysts, has been sounding the same alarm for years. If Democrats want to survive, they need to move back to the center. It's a simple message and one that long overdue. The party has drifted so far into ideological theatrics that it lost sight of what made liberalism appealing in the first place. In blunt terms, Maher argues that Democrats must let go of the constant wave of woke policies that push mainstream voters away. People aren't looking for lectures or cultural crusades, they want practical solutions, stability, and common sense. By shedding the fringe fixations and returning to the core principles that once defined liberalism: personal freedom, fairness, opportunity, and rational governance the party could finally rebuild the trust and support it has been steadily losing.
Problem is, Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to Thing is, socialism will you. Because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked. Like Kevin Federline.
We've said it countless times on this channel, and we'll keep driving the point home. Socialism has repeatedly failed wherever it's been put into practice. On paper, it sounds beautiful, almost poetic. The promise of perfect equality, shared wealth, and a system where no one is left behind is enough to make any political newcomer fall head over heels. But step outside the idealistic fantasy and into the real world, and the flaws become impossible to miss. In practice, socialism repeatedly collides with the same fundamental problems tied to human behavior and incentives. People will always find ways to exploit any system, but socialism practically opens the door for abuse. Those in power can take advantage of it, those without incentives can coast, and the dream of fairness quickly devolves into stagnation, corruption, and economic decline. It isn't cynicism, it's history, reality, and plain common sense.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess.
Interestingly, it's the younger generation that seems most captivated by socialism, and it's not hard to see why once you look closer. For many young people, anything they haven't personally lived through feels either poorly executed or never truly attempted. History becomes optional, and experience gets dismissed. They convince themselves that if something failed before they were born, it must be because the people who tried it lacked their intelligence, their technology, or their fresh approach. This mindset leads them to believe they possess the magic formula that can finally make an old, flawed system function exactly as they envision. It's a blend of idealism, impatience, and the belief that modern intentions can automatically fix historical problems. But there's a simple reality they often overlook. Socialism hasn't collapsed because of the wrong operators, it has collapsed because the system itself clashes with human nature. And no generation, no matter how confident, can rewrite that truth.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
Many young voters in New York are in for a rude awakening once Mandani starts rolling out his full slate of socialist policies. The utopia they imagine, endless benefits, free everything, and no real consequences, will run headfirst into reality. It's easy to get swept up in big promises, but it's a very different experience when those promises are paid for with your own money. Mandani is already talking openly about making New York financially independent from federal funding by increasing taxes, a warning sign that should concern anyone paying attention. People are leaving the state in record numbers because the cost of living and taxes are already overwhelming. And if these socialist policies take root, that exodus is only going to speed up. In the end, those who cheered the loudest will learn the hard truth. Socialism isn't a dream, it's a bill, and it always comes due.
Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
It's both fascinating and troubling how the Democratic Party, especially since the Obama era, has gravitated toward policies and philosophies that sound idealistic but consistently fail in practice. Instead of prioritizing solutions that actually work, the party often chases ideas rooted more in ideology than in real-world results. Take Kamala Harris, for example, promoting policies that would allow biological men to compete in women's sports while overlooking the clear physical differences and issues of competitive fairness. Bernie Sanders pushes for a single-payer healthcare system, an admirable concept on paper, but one weighed down by practical challenges, cost, and massive bureaucracy. And now there's Zoran Manani, who seems convinced that prosperity can be achieved through free groceries and free bus rides, as if giveaways alone can fix deep economic issues.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic Socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy.
Recently, I was catching up with an old friend when this very topic came up. It reminded him and me of something we've been noticing for years. Many of the policies Maher criticizes are already woven quietly into our system. Programs that sound great on paper, free benefits, heavy government involvement, and constant redistribution have gradually become part of everyday life, creating structures that often reward dependence rather than initiative. It's a slippery slope, and the effects are becoming harder to ignore. What became clear from that conversation, and from watching the political landscape unfold, is that the Democratic Party desperately needs a moment of self-reflection. The party has to distance itself from the socialist wing and return to practical, centrist policies that resonate with most Americans. If they fail to course-correct, they risk drifting even further into ideological extremes, alienating voters, and setting off consequences that could quickly spin out of control.
Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
We all know who the wild card is here, so there's no need to dwell on that. What we can't overlook is what happened at the border under the Biden administration. Kamala Harris' stint as the so-called border czar drew heavy criticism, and not without reason. Maher argues that the border situation under Biden felt chaotic, with overwhelmed systems and weak oversight. It was a breakdown in planning, execution, and accountability that pushed the system to its limits. What makes it even more striking is the non-stop political theater surrounding it. Many Democrats are still attacking Trump border policies as overly harsh, while conveniently sidestepping the fact that much of the disorder they now attribute to him took shape under their own leadership. Accountability, it seems, is in short supply.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods. Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal. You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that shit again.
Some of the stories surrounding these socialist-leaning Democrats sound so extreme that people have a hard time believing them. Take the example Maher recently highlighted. Attendees were only allowed into a conference if they could show a photo of a negative COVID test. Think about that digital proof as a gatekeeper for basic participation. It sounds absurd, almost laughable, yet it perfectly illustrates how far these policies can stretch. And at the bigger point. This isn't just one strange incident, it's a preview of what could happen if socialism gains broader influence. Policies like these can feel controlling, impractical, and invasive, leaving people frustrated and boxed in. It's a cautionary reminder of the gap between idealistic promises and real-world consequences. The pattern is becoming unmistakable. From extreme COVID rules to unsustainable socialist proposals, the fallout from these ideas is getting harder to ignore. Young voters may be captivated by idealistic visions, but reality tends to shatter those fantasies quickly. History shows that socialism, no matter how inspiring it looks on paper, struggles under practical scrutiny. If Democrats want to stay relevant, they need to drop these extremes, move back to the center, and focus on solutions that actually work for most Americans. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this.